I don't feel like it's possible to talk about this book without mentioning the 1980 Stanley Kubrick film. So, you know what? I'm just going to embrace it and do both. So, here's Mikey. Danny was standing outside room 217 again. The passkey was in his pocket, and he was staring at the door with a kind of drugged avidity, and his upper body seemed to twitch beneath his flannel shirt. He pushed the door open, and it swung smoothly without a creak. He stepped into the bathroom and walked toward the tub dreamily as it propelled from outside himself, as if the whole thing were from one of his dreams. He pulled the shower curtain back, and the woman in the tub had been dead for a long time. She was bloated and purple, her gas-filled belly rising out of the cold, ice-rimmed water like some fleshy island. Her eyes were fixed on Danny's, glassy and huge like marbles. She was grinning, her purple lips pulled back in a grimace. Her hands were frozen on the porcelain side of the tub like crab claws. Danny shrieked, but the sound never escaped his lips. Turning inward and inward, it fell down in his darkness like a stone into a well. The woman was sitting up, still grinning, her huge marble eyes fixed on him. She was sitting up, her dead palms made squirting noises on the porcelain. Danny turned and ran. He ran full tilt into the outside door of 217, which was now closed. He began hammering on it, far beyond realizing that it was unlocked and he had to only turn the knob to let himself out. Small children are great acceptors. They don't understand shame or the need to hide things. This inhuman place makes human monsters. Hey, what's up, bookworms and constant readers? Mike back again to talk a little more into the multiverse of Stephen King by talking about his 1977 classic novel, The Shining. Guys, I feel like this novel is so iconic that it is one of the pillars of horror literature at this point. This is his third published work and the follow-up to his previous two hits, Carrie and Salem's Lot. So, there was a lot to live up to at that point. So, did this raise the bar? Or did this fall below expectations? I think we're going to talk about it. But I do think that the mere fact of how many people know this story and they've never even read this book kind of just props up its legacy a little bit. But again, we're going to get into it. Now, the format for the Into the Multiverse series, as you know, is I'm going to talk about what it's about, what makes it good or bad, why you should read it, before ending with talking about spoilers and the connections within King's greater multiverse. I put the connections at the end because I think a lot of those are going to be spoilers towards books I haven't covered yet. So as you know, I'm covering these in publication order, and just the novels. I'm not doing short stories or no short story collections. I might do them in novellas, but I'm not going to be covering short story collections, and I'll be doing the Richard Bachman stuff at a later date. But I feel like people have been waiting for me to get to The Shining. I already did one for Carrie. I talked about that a while back. I'll put that one up here for you if you didn't get to see it yet. And then I also talked about Salem's Lot, and it was a time when vampires were still scary. And I will also put this one up there for you to check out. And if you just are curious what this whole series is about, I have a ton of Stephen King videos on this channel. There's a video called Into the Multiverse, which explains what the series is. But you guys, if you're watching number 3 now, I'm hoping that you already understand what the format is here. So I feel like The Shining is going to bring in some first-time viewers to the channel because I feel like this is one of King's most read books. So I feel like people, that even if they aren't huge King fans, might have dipped into this one. So I kind of wanted to give a quick little rebuff there. Before I start, I do want to kind of just talk about my experience with this book. I think I first read it when I was 15. In my video about how I became a constant reader, I mentioned that when I was 15, I first discovered it. I read it, and then I was amazed that my high school library had almost everything that Stephen King had published up to that point. When I was a teenager, Stephen King was still considered like the devil, So it was stunning to me that they were in the school library, and I checked out everything I hadn't read and devoured it, and The Shining was one of those. And when I started my great Stephen King reread, as I called it a couple years back, I was just interested in how things hit me differently at 15 years old and not knowing a thing about life, and approaching 40 years old with young kids and seeing how the things hit me then. And much like with it, this one had a much different experience with me. A second reading, same with Pet Sematary, which should be coming around to in a little while. But that's kind of what I want to talk about here. So I read it when I was 15, read it again last year when I turned 40, and I had a very different experience, but we're going to talk about that with how we always start these things, and we're going to talk about what is it about. Now, The Shining centers around a relatively small cast for a Stephen King novel. It's just mostly the Torrance family. This is Jack, Wendy, and their 5-year-old son, Danny. Now, they're on their way to Colorado for, where Jack has been hired as the winter caretaker for the Overlook Hotel. This is just quite normal. I mean, a lot of places do this. It's just too cold, or there's a blizzard usually during the winter, so they'll close for the year, but they still need someone to kind of, make sure that things get taken care of, make sure that the premises stay intact, make sure that, no windows get busted open, make sure that the boiler gets changed, things like that. Typical stuff. It kind of makes sense. So it's not anything unusual here, but we learn over the course of the story that many wild events have taken place over the history of this hotel, including, executions and affairs and mob dealings and murders and many, many dark things that are revealed slowly. But the thing that King adds to this story that makes it different from just any old haunted hotel story is that Danny, their son, is supernaturally gifted in what is known as the Shining. This kind of allows Danny to, not kind of, it does. This allows Danny to, he can read minds, he can communicate telepathically, he can see past and maybe future possible events, and he's also sometimes visited by an ethereal figure named Tony that speaks through him. But meanwhile, Jack must deal with his demons in the bottle and his seemingly constant disability to take care of adult responsibilities. He's just always messing up, and he's always trying to deal with this, hold his marriage together, not be a terrible father, and then he's got to try to deal with this hotel, or what possesses this hotel from getting into his head. And that is how we set the stage for what I believe makes the book good. Now, this is a section called What Makes It Good or Bad. Guys, obviously I'm a big King fan. The book is good. This is one of King's better ones for sure. I mean, it has the legacy that it has for a reason. So I'm definitely leaning towards good. There is some criticism, of course. There's criticism in every book. But let's talk about some of the good or bad. Now, I think this was King at the peak of his creative horror. I mean, there are chapters in this that are just spine-tingly. In the chapter that's inside room 217, I have it bookmarked in here because it's so good, and it's just like when I want to give someone an example of what makes Stephen King just terrifying, peak Stephen King terrifying, that's the one to read. I've said again that I feel like Pet Sematary is his scariest book, but this book has the scariest single chapter in anything that he's ever written. And I'll stand by that forever. Both ages that I read that chapter, man, I just got some chills in my bones. And not in a good way, as in like, oh my God kind of way, just freaky. It's just freaky. You start hearing noises all around your house and stuff like that while you're reading it. It's a blood running cold kind of way. So if you're looking to see how King got the whole Master of Horror moniker, this is worth your time. And I also think that something that's really great is the whole concept behind the Shine. We had dealt with stuff, about telepathy and things like that, but it felt like a fresh take on both telepathy and clairvoyance. It was an intriguing fusion of the two. And being able to communicate with people on the other side of the globe just kind of makes the events outside of the Overlook Hotel seem important in this one. Usually just be like, oh, whatever, you don't even need this part. Being able to look into the future, maybe, to possible events, it's kind of a new wrinkle that I think King would later master when he wrote The Dead Zone, which I'll be covering in May. I plan on doing one of these a month leading up to Halloween, where I have something special planned. But another thing is I like that the way that King deals with the very real struggles of marriage and children and alcohol abuse. These are very real problems, that a lot of people wouldn't consider in a novel like this. But I always say that the real monsters in a Stephen King story are the harm that humans do to one another. That's the real scary part. And the pain that they cause to one another is absolutely prevalent in The Shining. It is a dominating factor. Marriage is hard work. Raising a child that maybe has some kind of disability, that's even more work. obviously we know Danny has something a little different, but you can see how his parents would think, oh, he's just, he's got some problems, and he's got like autism or something like that. They don't know, but that's very, very stressful. And adding a history of addiction to alcohol on top of that makes every day a struggle for Jack. He's not just fighting to keep his family together. He's fighting to stay away from the liquor, So it's a struggle, an internal struggle and an external struggle. And I think that makes for the best kind of protagonist in a book like this. But if there is a bad in this book, it is what some might consider filler. Now, a lot of people I know that aren't crazy for King's prose or his writing style, and they accuse him of going off on tangents not relative to the story. To me, I find these great because I feel like it develops the characters. It makes them seem more real and relatable, and you can understand the struggles that they're going through, and it makes you root for them. It makes you want to see them succeed and see that they're just like us. They have normal, everyday problems greater than just, hey, there's ghosts here or there's monsters. They have normal problems just like you or me. And that is always something that King does that makes it more relatable. But there are some chapters here where it's like cleaning out gutters and taking care of wasps' nests and stuff and fixing the boiler that people don't think is important. But as you keep reading, you see its symbolism, and it is important. So you need to read it. I'm saying for a first-time reader, they might not understand, or I'm sorry, a first-time reader of Stephen King books, not like a first-time reader. If this is the first book you ever read, whoa. But for a first-time King reader, I can see why they think that these things aren't important. I heard this a lot when I did Cujo. I'll save that for when I do my Cujo review. But I think these things are important to show that people live everyday normal lives, and then when the shit hits the fan, you realize either, you know what, that stuff really wasn't important, or that stuff has prepared me for this moment. So I think it's really good. And if you look hard enough in this book, you can see why those events matter. Now let's get into why you should read it. For me, I feel like The Shining has just become a part of our pop culture. It really has for this generation and the previous one. It never seems to go away. Everybody can talk about this book or that movie and know what is going on, what you're talking about. Everyone has an opinion on it. Everyone has something to say. Even people who haven't read the book or watched the movie know here's Johnny, right? Which I'll get into when I get into the differences between the movie and the book and spoilers. But for anything, I feel like it's like the historical significance of it. I feel like you should read it just because. I don't want to say it should be on reading lists or anything like that, because I feel like that gets into a whole nother can of worms where everybody's like, what's a classic and what's not. I don't try to do that because I feel like in the end, we're going off of someone's opinion dictating if something is a classic or not. So I can't really say that. I'm definitely not going to say that this should be on reading list, but if you are into the horror genre, you should definitely read The Shining. Like I said, I feel like it's one of the pillars. It's right up there, with some of the best Lovecraft stuff. It's up there with Poe. It's up there with, there's a lot of other horror authors. I'm not going to get into it because when I compare King and Poe, I get a lot of pushback because they aren't comparable, and I understand that. And that's really not what I'm doing. I'm going to do Poe this October, and I'll explain why I constantly make that recollection. It's because of something for me. When I was first really getting into Stephen King, we were learning about Edgar Allan Poe in literature class. So I've always just kind of compared and contrasted the two to where it seems like I always can't talk about one without talking about the other. Okay, now I'm going off on a tangent. Another reason you should read it, I feel like this is one of King's scariest. You are reading early King. You're reading it probably for the frights, for the chills. Later he keeps transforming himself, and he's become a much different writer that isn't just bound to the horror genre. But this is what he was known for. It was his bread and butter. And a lot of people like to say when Stephen King was an alcoholic and was a drug addict, it's when he was writing his best stuff. This has peaked that time. Jack Torrance, I'm pretty sure he was projecting Stephen King onto the page a little bit. The guy's a writer. He's dealing with alcohol abuse. He's dealing with children and how hard it is to keep a marriage together. These were a lot of things that Stephen King was going through at the time. And you can see that in a lot of his stories, how he writes his real-life experiences into some of these stories. And again, that just makes it better for me, realizing that these struggles are someone's horror story. That's what makes it special to me. I think you should also read it to see the differences from the movie. I think this is the rare occasion where both a Stephen King adaptation and a Stephen King book are good. It usually always seems to be like, a movie was pretty bad, the book was great, or the movie was okay, I just didn't like some of the changes that they made, the book was better. This is one of those occasions where, yeah, there are some major changes from the book, but both mediums are awesome. They're both great stories, and I feel like the whole King absolutely hated that movie, that has taken on such a myth at this point. And I feel like King has explained it numerous times, and it has just evolved to, oh, what does he know? That's one of the scariest movies ever, and he didn't like it. Oh, he's so stupid. I feel like that's what people who are just completely ignorant think, and that's not the case. And I'll explain that, because now, guys, I'm going to talk about spoilers. So if you have not read the book, you see the movie, I guess you're fine. You don't have any interest in reading the book, okay? You can probably stay here. But I say, if you plan on reading the book and you don't want to know, I'd probably bookmark this video, come back after you read it. It's really not that long for a Stephen King book. You can probably knock this out, even if you're a slow reader in a month. It's not a really heavy read. But again, I will always recommend that you read the book before you go into these spoiler sections. But first, let's talk about the differences from the movie. There's no "here's Johnny." There's no axe through the door. There's no all work and no play moment. There's no hedge maze. And at the end of the book, the hotel blows up. So yes, there are quite a few changes from it. And let's talk about what King didn't like. There's three things, I think, here. First, he said he didn't like that Jack Nicholson seemed like he was crazy from go. And if you watch the movie and you deny that, dude, there were parts where I was like, well, dude, Jack's already crazy. It's the eyebrows. The eyebrows, to me, always made Jack Nicholson look crazy. So he felt like Jack seemed like he was crazy right away, so it wasn't earned. His descent into madness, like in this book, wasn't earned. Makes sense. Another reason is he said that Wendy was I believe he says, one of the most misogynistic things ever put to film, because she is just a shrinking violet, and Wendy is not like that in the book. She's not like the protagonist of the story, but she don't put up with them shit either, So, yeah, awful casting, in my opinion, for that movie. I've been over that a few times, but I've also heard Kubrick kind of absolutely made those people crazy, and it was captured on film. So that's his two biggest problems. I think the third one is King was a very young author when this was. He'd only had 3 books out when they were filming this movie. It's getting filmed like almost immediately. And apparently, no, I actually think he had already wrote The Stand, I believe, when he was on the visiting on the movie set, and Kubrick basically was pretty shitty to him. Told him, get lost. And I think that obviously when you're a very young author and you're looking at your work being put to film and someone's just absolutely rude to you, it's going to be like, fuck that guy. That's how you're going to feel. He has never said that, but it has been told that Kubrick was very dismissive of Stephen King on the movie set. So I think that might have soured us. So again, I feel like Stephen King hates this movie so much. I think that's been overblown. He talked about what he didn't like, but the fact that he always makes references when he does some of his meta moments in his books, and he makes references to the Jack Nicholson Shining movie, I think he's kind of come around on it. I'm sure he still has his problems with it. Who wouldn't when it's one of your creative works and they've changed things? Who wouldn't? I can't blame him for that. But I also think that spooked King so much now that anytime anyone asks him his opinion on one of his movie adaptations, he's always like, I thought it was great. And you see the movie, you're like, no, it really wasn't. So, I mean, when he said that Dark Tower movie was good, I knew, yeah, he just says that now. He just says that because he doesn't want more this kind of this myth about how much he hates this movie being applied to anything else if it resonates with audiences. So that's just kind of how it goes. Look, I think that the movie's fantastic. I think that the book is fantastic. I've read the book twice. I've watched the movie probably 24 times. I think it's one of the best horror films ever made. It's amazing, really. It has a terrific soundtrack. It will just give you goose flesh the whole time you watch it. So I think it's awesome. The 1997 miniseries, yeah, you know what? It was 100% faithful because it was written by King and he was there to make sure it stayed up. Problem was, it was made out of a budget of about $12 and the acting looked like it was all first takes. It looks like there was no, okay, let's try that again. So it kind of just check your expectations there. And you might actually enjoy, if you didn't like the way that the movie adapted the source material, maybe you should watch that 1997 miniseries. And maybe you'll like it a little more. Just expect that it's going to be low budget and the acting is quite subpar. Now I'm going to get into some of the spoilers from the book here that really resonated with me. Hearing how Jack lost his job because of his alcoholism and how that actually ended up causing him to break Danny's arm. That's the kind of thing I feel are Jack and Wendy's, that's what has their marriage on the rocks, so to speak. That's obviously a great strain on the relationship. She considered divorcing him. he's saying, you know what, I'm going to, right now, I'm going to sober up, I'm going to change. And he's trying. He really is trying. And he's actually been sober for a little while, but it's a struggle. I'm not sure most marriages would have survived through that, really, through child abuse. Given it was kind of explained away as like he was upset. It wasn't like he just went in the room when the kid was playing with his toys and just said, "Come here, you little bastard," and broke his arm. It wasn't like that. He jerked him up because he spilled something all over the pages on the story that he was writing. And, he was drunk and he picked him up like this and it just pulled his arm the wrong way, So I'm not saying that is acceptable at all as a father of two very small children. That is definitely not acceptable. I'm just saying it isn't quite like it sounds. But again, it's kind of one of those things. It's like if you are a spouse that can forgive that, that's great. I admire that relationship. But it does get him to try to clean his act up. I think when Jack is told in his job interview that the previous caretaker, Delbert Grady, that he had murdered his little girls with a hatchet, he shot his wife with a shotgun, and then he shot himself the same way. That was when I was just like, that's chilling. I've had some weird job interviews, but that was something else there. Yeah, that's kind of like when you're selling someone a house and you heard it might be haunted. You don't bring it up. You don't bring that up. But this guy did. So I guess he wanted to make sure that he was going to get a good caretaker. The instant bond between Danny and Dick Halloran is something special, I think. There's always the whole buddy aspect in a Stephen King book. The friendship that grows between two unlikely characters. And it's done really well here. It's done very, very well. And it's like you say you have a condition that you think it's something you should be ashamed of, or it just makes you a weirdo or whatever. Then you meet someone else with that same condition and they say, no, this makes you special. This makes you unique. And this is okay. I got to think to a 5-year-old kid, that would mean everything. And that's how it comes across in their relationship here. So I really liked the relationship between Danny and Dick Halloran. And I think in the Dr. Sleep novel, which I won't talk about here, I already reviewed that one. That's why it comes across much, much better than it did in the movie, which, yeah. Another thing about this book, Dick doesn't get, killed with an axe. Dick lives. Anyhow, again, it was a really cool scene in the movie, though, I'm not going to lie. The relationship between the two makes Dick going through that blizzard to come and help them at the end, it makes it more believable that he would do this, that he would leave sunny Miami, Florida, to come back and try to help these people in the middle of a blizzard. Let's get to the red rum thing. That was genius, and I feel like it's just become a gimmick at this point, but I wish more people had read it before seeing the movie, because the revelation of that in the book, kapow, man, it's so good. It's so good. Now you read it now and you're like, oh, well, yeah, I feel like I would have seen that coming. I'm not I saw it coming guy. I'm along for the ride guy when I read a story. I don't try to figure everything out like that. So yeah, it was damn. Next, I want to talk about some of the hauntings that take place in the hotel. I mean, the hedges, they come to life. That's just kind of nuts. And I realize why they didn't do that in the movie, because in 1980, I don't really think you had the technology to do that and make it not look hilarious. But it's very, very, very spooky stuff. There's a fire hose that chases them down the hall. There's spirits using the elevator. Just creepy stuff, more so than just like a jump scare kind of quality. Just almost like the spirits, they know you're there, but they're not really going to acknowledge your existence. They're just going to kind of do what they keep doing, and to me, that makes it more eerie. And that brings me to Jack speaking with the ghosts of Lloyd and Delbert Grady. Those are some of the creepiest things that King has ever written, and it just helps in his slow roll of Jack's descent into madness, to where it just seems like I'm not doing anything wrong. They're just kind of convincing him. It's uncomfortable in the best psychological horror kind of ways, and that's what I love about King, is the uncomfortable horror. That's the good stuff, where you see it coming and you can't stop it. You're just like, oh my God, I got to go through this, I also like the Tony reveal. That one was on another level. Anybody says they saw that coming, I'm sorry, I think you're a liar. I never saw it coming. And it being an older version of Danny, that's just something I wish had kind of played out in Dr. Sleep a little more. But, I already talked about that in my review for Dr. Sleep. Sorry, I keep going to that. But yeah, very, very quality writing there. and Jack regaining control, for a minute after he's just totally lost it, to tell Danny that he loves him and that he needs to run, was just heartbreaking. And that's one of those things that didn't bother me that much when I was 15. But now at this age with 2 young children, dagger, it really, really hit emotionally the second time. And it was tough, especially with, that being the last time he sees his father. It's just tough stuff. And that's, for the most part, that's most of the things that stand out to me. Let's get into the multiverse connections here, because there are quite a few. Now, I'm sure you probably recognize some of these if you are a King reader. There are some a little more meta, like I've talked about. I like to think of, there's the multiverse, and then there's alternate timelines multiverse. So if you see something where it's, okay, well, he's actually referencing something in a book that is a book, like I mentioned in my Carrie review, about how, what did they mention? I think it was in Dead Zone, the connection where John Smith mentions, something about Carrie. He mentions the book Carrie, and saying, okay, so maybe that isn't part of the multiverse. The big thing with King, when you get into the Dark Tower, you see that there are other worlds than these. There are alternate timelines, alternate realities. So I like to think that while these all share a multiverse, if it seems like it's getting too meta and some of these things just seem like, well, that's just making it sound like it's not connected, you got to think maybe this is an alternate timeline. That's the way I look at it, at least, and that's the way that the Dark Tower tries to make you feel about it. But first up, we have It. It has Dick Halloran is in that one. Him and Mike Hanlon's father actually served together in the Army, and they're both at the Black Spot when it is in that big fire in that section of the book. Awesome stuff. And I actually wish that they had done a little more on that in the It movies that they just put out last year. But again, I keep talking about reviews I've already done. Let's talk about Misery. Misery has one. One of Annie's victims, he was named Andrew Pomeroy, and he told her he was doing a magazine article on the Overlook Hotel, before she killed him. And then Dark Tower. I think Dark Tower is going to be in all these. I truly feel like Dark Tower connects everything, and I don't think that that's a big secret or a hot take. Everyone kind of thinks about that. But in the drawing of the 3, Eddie looks through one of the doors and he finds himself like on the movie set of The Shining, and then later on he starts thinking about the tracking shots of Danny on the big wheel and the twin girls and stuff. Also, this one is just kind of me. I always thought that, this is just me being a Dark Tower obsessive here. 19 is a very big deal in the Dark Tower, and if you are a Dark Tower fan, you understand the significance of that number. And I always thought room 217 is 2 plus 17. Maybe it's just me. Another one is Regulators. The Regulators, you have a letter from Patricia Allen to Catherine Goodloe, and she mentions the Shining novel. So another one of those, it's a meta kind of moment, right? Maybe an alternate timeline. You don't know. We have Apt Pupil. Now, in Apt Pupil, in the play that Jack is writing in The Shining, there is a headmaster named Danker. And this is also the alias that Kurt Dusander uses while he is in hiding during Apt Pupil. Don't know if it's the same person, but it's an interesting take. The Talisman, I actually had to look this one up because I haven't read The Talisman yet. I mentioned that this is going to be my first reading of The Talisman when I hit the Into the Multiverse on it this winter. But the boy that Jack cuts from the debate team is named George Hatfield. I already knew that, obviously, but apparently that is the name of a student at Thayer High School in The Talisman. So, small one, but I think the person who pointed that one out for me, that's the only one I did not know on my own, because the last one is in the Tommyknockers. Guard thinks to himself that maybe he should make like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, when he's thinking about getting an axe and breaking his way into the shed in that book. Man, I can't wait to talk about Tommyknockers. Such a crazy book. But guys, that is The Shining. So I feel like it's kind of got to that point now where it's just so popular, you'll kind of get a lot of contrarian takes on this book. That's fine. The book might not click for everybody. If you're into classic King horror, this is definitely the book that you should check out. Or if you want to get into classic King horror, this is definitely the one. I always say, when someone says, tell me the scariest thing I can read by Stephen King, I mention 3 books to him: Pet Sematary, Salem's Lot, The Shining. That's the 3 that you should read if you want to make your nipples hard because you're scared. I feel like those are the most immersive, those are the most personal horror that there is. So that's my holy trinity of King horror there, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about about Pet Sematary later on this year. So that's it for episode number 3 of Into the Multiverse. Going to be hitting you guys back up next month as we talk about The Stand, and with the whole virus madness that's going on in the United States right now, or I'm sorry, the world right now. Not just, it's just now coming to the States and everybody's just freaking out about it. I feel like that one might actually be pretty close to home talking about. So I'll see you next month for Captain Trip. So drop in the comments, guys. Tell me, did you read The Shining? You know, did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you not like? But be aware of spoilers, guys. I do not delete comments. So if there are spoilers in the comments, you're going to read them. So be careful if you haven't read this book yet. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will talk to you in the comments.